Hi, and welcome everyone. This is our second event in the series on immersive spatial learning. I'm Jessica Millstone. I'm one of the organizers of the over 8,000 member New York EdTech meetup and also managing director at Copperwire Ventures, which is an early stage investment fund supporting women-led technology companies. I'm so excited today to have Jessica Ochoa Hendricks and Marcia Rapone as our guests today. I have to say, Jessica is one of the people who introduced me to the ways in which VR can really radically change levels of student engagement and overall learning and increase understanding around science concepts in particular. If you haven't seen her TED Talk, you'll have to check it out after our event, of course. Jessica is also someone who clued me into how many of the pioneers in VR and education companies are women, and also helped lead me to discover Emily from 8th Lab, who's here today, and some of the other wonderful women who are working in VR in education and beyond. Needless to say, I'm really glad both she and Marcia are here today with us to show and tell what it looks like to use BioDive with students. So let's get to it. I'm excited to be co-hosting this online event with Emily Jolie from 8th Lab. She's one of the creators of Zoe, a software that allows students to create their own immersive experiences. Okay, Emily, take it from here.
Thanks, Jessica. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. If you were here last week, we're glad to see you again. So aside from our tools for students, our big focus at Zoe is our professional learning program to help educators leverage virtual and augmented reality to boost student engagement. And this online series is really a sneak peek of what that program includes. Each session, we're going to show you hands-on how teachers are leveraging immersive technologies with their students. And so without further ado, we'll give a warm welcome to Jessica and Marcia, who will be showing us how the BioDive platform is being used by middle school students. One thing that I really liked about BioDive when Jessica showed it to me the first time is how it really uniquely mixes the use of web and VR in a super compelling way. We're going to use the Q&A feature to submit your questions, so please do that. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, but feel free to submit during. This is also meant to be a conversation. So let's get started with you, Jessica, so we can learn a bit about BioDive, and then we'll also see how Marcia is using it with her students.
All right, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here with you and to have a chance to talk about BioDive and its use, particularly for remote learning. And I'm thrilled that, Marcia, you're able to join us. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. Let's see. And share. So we're going to start off just kind of walking you through a quick presentation about how we've developed BioDive and some of the questions that we've thought about. And then we will start to show you the different pieces. So this is Team Killer Snails, and our company was founded to create games and experiences to inspire a love of science. So all of our games, we really focus on igniting students' curiosity and creating immersive experiences, and including opportunities for educators to enhance engagement. We always are here to support educators. Those are one of our main goals. Our thinking was, around how can we create more meaningful play, particularly in the science area, and how do we represent these different experiences, and how do we represent different voices? Our team is composed of me, as well as a practicing marine biochemist and a learning scientist. So we always work with a variety of teachers who help to write the curriculum as we are thinking through it. So what we found is studying what works and why, is we're really looking, when we create this VR and this multimodal learning that combines virtual reality with these digital journals, is we're looking at the knowledge acquisition and how we're training these psychomotor skills, how we're building collaboration and developing user engagement enjoyment, but we're also trying to constantly navigate cognitive overload, which for educators is something that's always on their mind as they are teaching. So some of the questions that we've been exploring as a company are, how can web-based and VR technologies be combined to enhance learning? And how can we use VR to foster collaboration, particularly now when so many of us are learning and teaching remotely, how can we continue to do that? And also, one of the big things that we like to do is to always put students in the role of a scientist, and how can taking on that role of a scientist impact learning? So our methodology, basically there are three big components to BioDive, which is there's the digital science journal, which is where students are going to, that's where they're answering questions, they're building, they're making models, they're developing hypotheses, and then they're going into the virtual world to test these out in these XR interactions. And there's an educator assessment dashboard that is fed by both the interactions in VR as well as in the digital science journal. So this is kind of how it looks. There's group virtual reality experiences, there's these digital science journals, and then the teacher dashboard updates in live time as students are completing the questions. We're very excited to kind of give you a picture of what all of this looks like in screenshot form, and we'll also be taking you through it in real form soon. Essentially, with the class-wide VR experiences, students can use these Google Cardboards, which are very inexpensive viewers. Alternatively, particularly since people are now remote, we have added a web-based feature. So they can actually do this entirely online using any web-enabled device, from a Chromebook to a tablet to a mobile phone. They can go through the entire experience using any one of those devices. For the VR experiences, they're all fairly short and they all have very clear missions. They're not just doing this for the sake of, you know, something new and exciting. There's a specific goal and a tracker that shows their progress as they're going through. So now I'm going to introduce the BioDive Digital Science Journal, and here's where I'm going to start asking Marcia if she can share thoughts on when her students use this. Her students use this in person, so she's been thinking a bit about how she would recommend folks to use this who are remote.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this opportunity to share my knowledge about BioDive. I used BioDive in my classroom a while ago, but it was a powerful learning experience for my students. And I think the thing that grips them, that anchoring phenomenon, that anchoring story, the storyline that runs throughout the entire experience, starts on this page. There's a video that you watch, and you're actually welcomed as a scientist. And that was kind of the first thing that I really love about BioDive, is that it makes the student feel like, oh, I'm a scientist, because it's continually referring to them as scientist and then their last name. So a lot of kids would just mention that and be like, oh, okay. And then as we went through, they just continually kind of get that reinforcement that they're a scientist. So that was the one great thing, is that they could see themselves as scientists. The program itself is really nice, that there's this drag and drop kind of opportunities for kids to try to drag things and see if they're right. They don't stick if they're not right, so they can kind of get immediate feedback on whether or not they're getting this correct. Because I know a lot of times kids will be like, I don't know if I'm right or not. But there's also those opportunities where they're supposed to type in predictions, make inferences from tables. So on this, could you actually do the present, Jessica? So it's a little larger up at the top. Yeah. So on this slide, for example, you'll see the table of data, and there's two different locations. And then what they do is they try and make some predictions about what they will be seeing. And then they'll actually be collecting data later on too, when they go on their virtual experience. So it's a really nice way of helping to create a strong foundation of understanding, but then encouraging them to take that risk and make a prediction that may or may not be correct, but it doesn't matter, right? That's what science looks like, is making a prediction based on a set of data, or understanding knowledge, underlying knowledge, and then going out and testing it. So that's what's really nice about the system. There's a lot of vocabulary that is used, so there's definitions that are provided. So this is one area where I think in the digital environment, it may be better to have some maybe if you're asynchronous, having some videos prepared before this happens so that kids can experience the vocabulary before, because it is vocabulary intensive. But that could be just something to help support them to get started. And then these predicted versus observed. They make a prediction earlier on in the experience, and then they actually go and experience the VR, and then they see what they actually see. So they can compare what they thought what they were going to see with what they actually saw when they go on the VR dive. This is one slide that I love this. Like, I'm a chemistry data person, because science teachers, that's like our jam. But not all students are all about data and understanding tables. So for on the left-hand side, that graphic with the temperature, pH, salinity, clarity, and DO data, you can show them that there's 3 different locations, and they actually get to select the location that they want to go to as well when they go on the dive. So that's neat, because they have this opportunity for choice, which is always great to give students choice. And they can identify patterns in the data, and that's like the best. So this is hard though for students. So if you're a teacher teaching this remotely, you may need to help your students a bit in understanding how to tease patterns out of data sets, because it's not an innate skill. So that would be some kind of like mini lesson that could either happen alongside of the biodive experience or before it, just to make sure that they're equipped to make this kind of this activity happen. Oh, and this was, I think this is your slide, Jessica, but I just want to say, before you start the experience, they give you a really wonderful support guide. And it's a nice pacing guide too. So it's 5 days, and it tells you what, the goal should be for the day. Students can go ahead, and I had a lot of students who did. Some students don't get to the whole way through that one individual day, that pacing guide, but it's nice because it's all linked to NGSS and kind of like what you should have, what they should be ready to do before they get started on that day. So.
Yeah, and again, this is the educator assessment dashboard that you can see here. And the way that you would read this is the green ones are ones that students have finished. If they have just skipped the journal and gone straight into VR, then you can see that they did that. And if they have started the VR but then not finished it, it's this yellow color. So you can kind of track all of your students' progress as it updates in real time, and they do not need to be on the same network. So this works for them and you, regardless if you're in the same building or not in the same building. And this is how students are notified when teachers leave feedback. It's these little exclamation points that will go away once the students actually clicked on it to read whatever feedback was provided. This is an example of the kind of feedback you can provide. As you can see, you can provide feedback through chat boxes, you can add stickers, and you can, put anything else, any other kind of comments. We're really into bad puns, so there's a lot of things like "whale done" or "snailed it." So the majority of your stickers are going to be kind of silly.
Well, it is middle school. I mean, come on, we have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we're just going for our audience.
I taught high school, and I am still cheesy, so they roll their eyes, but they love it.
High school students do love stickers, absolutely, especially virtual. If you've seen anyone Snapchat, you know that they love virtual stickers. So.
It's true.
At this point, we piloted this before releasing it. We piloted it with 836 students in New York and New Jersey area. And then we did a national pilot that Marcia was part of with 47 schools in 26 states. And they did show increases in learning between pre and post surveys. And our teachers said that they would use it again, which we were thrilled about. And again, a little bit more of teachers and students seem to really appreciate the experience, the multimodal way of being there. And one of the things that I really liked, my favorite quote from all of this is the student who said, "I could see myself as a scientist because it seems really fun." That's one of the things we want students to come away with, this idea that, you know, it's a completely attainable future and it is actually fantastic. It's, you know, the opportunity to develop questions, come up with hypotheses, answer them. It's a, you know, a wonderful lifestyle.
Well, it sounds like, as Marcia said right at the beginning, like that's the piece that captured the students' attention right away, is that they're in that role of the scientist. And so it sounds like you really like, that's something that's pulled all the way through.
Definitely.
Yeah. These are just some of the other kind of experiences that we have developed to date. And then what I wanted to show you all is, as I mentioned in this, BioDive is currently free for all people to use. Normally it would cost money, but we have made it free due to the coronavirus, as it does seem like the kind of tool that is incredibly beneficial right now for educators to use with students. So I just wanted to walk you quickly through what that process looks like, because I know a lot of teachers are like, great, it's a new tool, but it's going to be, how complicated is this to set up? So
it's easy, don't worry.
Yeah, that's
And
a short answer.
great support too. There's great support as well.
Yes, if you contact us and tell us that you're having issues, then we will immediately respond. So I have about 1 million accounts, so I'm going to use a fake one so that you'll see what it looks like if I had not already done this 2,000 times.
And it's wonderful that you're not only just supporting that, it's sort of supporting it through the free, having the product be free, but it's also, I hope we get into a little bit, like talk a little bit about how it can actually be used remotely. Yeah. And there's you know, forethought around that with you guys of like, oh, well, this is something that was imagined for the classroom, but since it is something you can use remotely, like how exactly would that look?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So basically you go through and then you register and add seats. And then I'm going to go check my email, which has other things which are not the email, but here's that one. And you verify and create password. And then when you log in, which I think I did.
Yep.
Oh, let's see if I can remember my, there. Then you'll see that you have your seats available, and all you do is you click plus class. You answer if your students can receive emails from outside of the school, because we did have teachers who thought that their students could, and then none of their students received anything. And if your students cannot receive them, then you will have to copy and paste the link to come to this. But otherwise, you just put in a class name, testing, and then you currently have 10 seats. You put in their email. If they're already Google users, then you will, then it'll just show up. So like, I'm just gonna put in one that I know has an account, and it'll just pop up their names. If they do not, then you will need to type, you know, what their name is. And then once you've done that and you've created your class, then you'll be able to see whether or not they have, this one you can see that they have used this and verified it, and here they haven't logged in yet. If they had logged in, then this would turn black, and if they had verified their email, then it would have the check mark. So that's all there is to it in terms of getting it set up. And then once they get it, then you just click it.
And tell us a little bit about, so what do the students have to have in order to use BioDive? Like, what do they already have to have at home?
An internet. They have to have some internet-enabled device. If they have either a tablet or a Chromebook or even just a mobile phone, if they have a laptop or a computer, even better. but that's all you need for it. For the virtual reality, when we originally designed it, we did design it for to be used with a phone and with these Google Cardboards. But if you don't have a Google Cardboard, you could still do it on a phone in the toggle mode, and it would still work very similar. And if you don't have access to a phone, but you do have, a tablet or a Chromebook, you can use WebVR. We just added WebVR earlier this spring, once the pandemic started. We added that as a new way for students to be able to use it, because a lot of students didn't have access to a mobile phone during the day as their parents needed it.
So the students can do all of the group work together, even though they're remote from each other. Is that possible for them to be able to do it together at all?
They won't see each other's answers on here. Only the teacher would see each other's answers. So they could, they could in theory do it the way that my son has been doing things, which is to have a web browser and also have Zoom open so he can just chat with his friends as he's working. But the answers are only visible between the students and the teachers.
Well, that's actually a nice use case though, for a teacher to maybe facilitate that.
And which, if you think about it, in a regular lab, like, you want students to be documenting their own data as well in their own words. So it's better that they're not all putting it onto one, as they each have their own.
And so tell me, I was also, Marsha, I was really excited about what you were talking about around data literacy. And I'm curious, like, how, is the data collected in BioDive? Is the data collected just through the experience itself, and then they're analyzing it out of the experience? Like, what's the balance between the in VR or in the VR world experience and the out of the world experience?
So you collect some data when you're in VR, and then you also are given some data based on the sites that you visit. So like, here's a set of data that's given to you, and then you interpret it over on the right hand side.
And then
interpret it.
Yeah.
Did I answer that question?
Yeah, building off of that. So as Marsha mentioned earlier, you pick your place that you're going to, and then you see that page around you can tap these circles to see how the factors, to see how the abiotic factors affect the biotic factors. And then you make your guess about what you think it's going to look like. And then when you come back, then you can compare them to see, going to the page, that's where you make your prediction. And then here you can see the predicted versus observed.
Can you speak a little bit to what I'm curious to hear more about what the VR or WebVR experience is for the students. Exactly what do they do when they're what's the balance between being on their journals, and then what exactly are they doing when they're inside their VR headset? What does that look like? Because I remember it was pretty fun to be there. And so kind of explaining a little bit that balance, that process for a student, and exactly what they do when they're in each different phases.
Yeah, I'm going to, Marsha, if you want to talk about that, I'm going to log myself into one of the ones that actually has people in it, and I'm going to try and show the WebVR. We'll see if I can see those up for it.
So there's several different VR experiences. The very beginning, the hook for the whole thing is there's this really cool video of a snail, and the kids literally, I have high school kids, they're like, this is so boring, these are just snails. And then they violently kill these fish, and the kids are like, oh my gosh, what just happened? So they're totally just wow, I want to know more about that. So then so they watch the video and they see it on a YouTube video kind of level, and then in the VR they actually get to go and travel around to find snails and watch them attack their various prey, 3 different types of prey, and so that's kind of they get to experience that by traveling around the ocean and seeing where these snails are. So there's the hook, the tap to watch, and then Um,
Then, hold on, I'm gonna see. We're gonna find out if my computer can do this. Try it in your browser. There we go.
Fingers crossed.
How many students, Marcia, how many students do you usually have in a class when you're doing a sort of project like this?
Okay, so I have, I use this in my environmental science class. I teach chemistry as well and climate science. If I taught biology, I could also use it very seamlessly in a biology type class. My school, when I was teaching biodive, had a one-to-one with iPads. So they all downloaded the app and then used their iPads. We had the Google Cardboards, but the phone issue was a little like dodgy. I teach in a high school where I have a very strict, and the school has a very strict, like no phones in the classroom kind of policy. So I didn't want to like send mixed messages or like, okay, get your phone out, we're gonna now do VR. So so we use the materials that our school gives us technologically. We are now a Chromebook school. So here's the experience of watching the snail attack its prey. So yeah, I have about 25 to around 25 students in the class. So it makes it easier when they have a one-to-one type of device that they can kind of move at their own pace and they're not waiting around for goggles, because that's when you have, you know, behavior issues, kids just standing around waiting for the goggles to be freed up. In this whole digital environment though, like you won't have to worry about that so much, since it's now web-based and you can experience the VR on the web.
What's your feeling about, I'm just curious, Marcia, like what's your feeling about like a sort of hybrid situation where students are home, learning at home at some points of the day or the year, the week, and then maybe together? Like, is this something that you could use in a hybrid classroom like that, kind of like a blended classroom?
Absolutely. I think this would be great for like the at-home piece. And then when they do come in face-to-face, we could do, you know, working on collecting data and interpreting it so that when they get to this part where they are looking at data and they have to interpret it in the biodive journal, they're kind of prepared for that. Doing hands-on data collection in the classroom, because I think if we have limited time face-to-face in class, you want to do those hands-on activities as much, the things with you know, Bunsen burners or chemicals that you wouldn't normally be able to do at home, obviously, but you could do in a classroom. That kind of data collection you could do in the classroom and then apply it in this kind of sense.
Do you often combine things like that? So you're doing experiments sort of in one part of your class and then other kinds of research or data collection and other, and sort of, you know, mush them all together?
Yes, I do a lot of choice in my environmental science class, especially. So some students are doing labs while other kids are doing art projects or are doing a video or doing kind of a manipulative. So, so I already kind of incorporate that into my classroom in person. So outside of school, I think it will be, it'll sort of be similar in that they choose a lot of what they're going to do. But then when they come into school, if this is the way it actually ends up playing out, when they come into school, then we do more the hands-on, like salinity lab or ocean density lab. We would do in person, collect that data, and then they would, you know, then they could do this.
So great. I mean, it's kind of the dream of the flipped classroom, but you know, certainly not how we expected our actual school days to play out. Jessica, there's actually a question for you. Hello from Rio. So I think maybe someone's coming in from Brazil. What software is being used here? Does this VR allow for interactivity? Are there some like buttons next to the scenes? Is it like, what's the interactivity level here?
Yeah, so we designed this in Unity, and on this one, this is the very first one they do on the first day. So we wanted it to be really introductory to understand how to move in VR, how to click on things in VR. So this one has the least amount of interaction, but the other ones all involve more. So for the other ones, for example, as Marcia mentioned, the data collecting ones, they're actually on a boat then, and they're using equipment to gather all of that abiotic data that you saw around, you know, what the dissolved oxygen level was, what the water clarity, and so on. They have to select the instruments, and then it animates to let them gather the data, and then it goes from there into their digital science journal. So with the Google Cardboard, you are kind of limited in terms of what you can do to, you know, clicks or double clicks or holding buttons down, but there is still opportunities for them to have meaningful interactions, which was what we, you know, prioritized in terms of trying to decide how to measure learning that way.
Is BioDive or any of the other experiences you're creating, are they going to be compatible with other headsets, Oculus or HTC?
We've started developing it to be compatible with Oculus. We haven't finished. We still plan to do so. Right now, we're keeping an eye on what's happening in the world, and we don't know, you know, when folks will get back, and when they do get back, what the sharing situation will look like. But we definitely have plans and have already begun with porting this to Oculus.
Yeah, last week we had a long, interesting conversation about the availability of Oculus, which is low. Also sharing devices. Also, I mean, something that I'm hearing about in schools in general is like this idea that it's very expensive, but to like have things to send home to families to kind of like keep that engagement level up at home, since they're, especially now, like the way we've been doing it, you know, to the end of this year, there's been no in-person time. But if there's some kind of hybrid time, you want to have a bridge between the school and home in some way, and sometimes hardware can kind of fill in some of those pieces for the community, your school community. So we talked a little bit about that, but it's definitely obviously a price issue. Marcia, do you think like your school or schools that you've worked in before, like what are some of the issues with using VR that you've seen, like around the hardware, around sharing? You mentioned, you know, the classroom management issue might come up. What are some other things that you've seen?
I think for the school that I'm in, we have a one-to-one policy, so that's already just not the reality for many schools across the country. So equitably, like our school is that's very fortunate. In a school that I worked in previously, there was barely even a laptop cart that functioned for the entire school. So I think that would be much harder to implement this in that kind of setting, not expecting them to use their data on their phone. If it is, you can do it on your phone. It would be fine. I mean, you don't need the cardboard to just use your phone to move around. It actually works really great. My students were doing that when they were having iPad issues. But it does use data, and there you go. You're asking the student to pay money to participate in it, and that's not always the reality for every student. So there's definitely an equity issue in accessibility as we move possibly towards a more split kind of reality. And I know that my school is very sensitive to that, but we'd also have the resources that, you know, we can send out Wi-Fi hotspots. Not all school districts have that luxury. So that's something that I think as a community, you know, nationwide and worldwide, would be a beneficial conversation to have.
Yeah. Have you, I mean, this is just, I'm just curious, like if you have seen technology really keep your school community together in any way, or has it been that it's so inequitable and it's so difficult to kind of manage all the relationships over technology? Like how has it sort of played out in the school that you're in right now?
I think we're still working on training students on how to use technology. I think there's this really big misconception that like, oh, it's a kid, they know how to use technology inherently, and that is not the case, like by a long shot. So, and I think that's just, you know, a function of time and not having the time, and you know, but I think my district does a really great job in connecting with technology, being sensitive to equity, and trying to, you know, make sure everybody is on the same page. So that's a really important first step, I think, in addressing those kinds of issues.
Yeah, and certainly we've had to like just do it all on the fly. We've had to, I mean, it's a grand experiment of, you know,
Right, exactly.
like all remote learning for
yes.
an unwilling experiment.
This totally
for sure.
like what teaching looks like, though. That's what we always are doing, whether we're in the classroom or we're at home. We're always trying to make it better for our students and create greater and richer learning experiences. And this is just another opportunity, right? But BioDive is a great experience, and it's a great thing to have in your back pocket if you're teaching about abiotic and biotic factors, data analysis, just, you know, visualizing yourself as a scientist, you know, getting beyond that old dead white guy thing, like, is there the only scientist there are? Like,
Right.
they're not, you know, like, you can be a scientist too, and that's what's cool about it.
I do love that part, that the part of the immersive experience is the person that you become, like the actual, like taking on that role. And you also got to hear from someone in the audience that, you know, teaching is about adapting to the needs of your students. We have another question from the audience. How do you manage collecting data and students' privacy at the same time? Do you does the product make it anonymous data, or is that something that you do as a teacher? I'll let you guys both answer.
We have it all de-identified. So when they, so we have no way of, sorry, I just got dark and I was muting myself. That way you could actually see me. But it's all de-identified so that it's not associated with any student in any way.
On the product end. So you as the project developer, right?
But for the teacher, they of course can see, because they need to be able to see who's submitted what, to be able to give feedback. So they can see it, but on our end we can't.
Has that been an issue for you at all, Marcia? Like in your school, like do you have any kinds of protocols around collecting student data and these EdTech products, whatever the EdTech product is that you're using?
Not that I know of. I haven't been trained in that specifically, but I would say when I'm collecting data, and if I'm like when I was working on master's data, like everything was random, you know, was not identifiable.
Right. So it is really important, I think, for teachers to pick products that do that automatically. I think it's true. It's not a heavy lift on the teacher and school end, I think, to guarantee that.
We have a our tech department, they have to approve everything, you know, so when we wanted to use this app, they had to go through it and check it, and then they make it downloadable onto the devices. So it's not like it's a free game. If you have an iPad, you can download any app you want. So if it's a district issue device, that is managed, but not by the teacher.
Got it. What other things? Emily, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask? I have a couple more, but I want to give some other airtime. Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
I muted myself because of the construction behind me for a little bit. Again, it's, you know, same day, same week.
Yeah, just on Wednesdays, just while we're doing events.
Just on Wednesday, of course.
They know your schedule.
Yeah, I know. No, but you did ask most of the questions that I already had. I mean, one that, you know, we're also very interested about is how is it to work together with between a software vendor and an educator? How is that relationship is, and have you, you know, having teachers working with you, Jessica, how is that valuable for you as you build your platform? And then similarly for you as a teacher, how is that valuable to work with Jessica and her team when you're actually using their platform?
Sorry, I just was looking at the chat for the first time, saw Jamie Donnelly is in here, and I'm having a moment because I've been following Jamie for ages, and I love her newsletters, and I'm really, really excited that you're here. Okay.
I'm a fangirl too, I'll admit that.
Hey, Jamie, thanks for coming.
Sorry, yeah, so we always work with teachers. It's been incredibly valuable to work with teachers on all of our products. because we want to make sure that firstly it's usable in the classroom. We're designing something for people who are going to use it. So when we work with them, they did a lot of the work on thinking about what we should include and how we're aligning it to standards and how we're really focusing on the areas that teachers want to focus on, that we have like a whole page where they're doing their observations, claims, evidence, research, that we're really trying to ensure that what's most important for science teachers is included. And the other thing about it that I briefly touched on in that presentation is that we pilot all the time. So prior to, before March, we were in schools at least twice a month working with actual students and actual teachers who were testing it while it was still in development. Not BioDive, because that was essentially finished at that point, but another one, GeoForge, that we were working on was, we were in the classrooms frequently to hear feedback and to just watch the students and teachers using it to see what they thought. We would ask the students, like, what do you wish you could do? We would ask the teachers, like, what other topics that you think are, that are challenging for students to learn that we could address in here. So working with educators has really, really formed all of what we do.
From my end, I was part of the pilot study.
Okay.
So when we went through the pilot study, there was no teacher dashboard. And that was one of the hardest parts about using BioDive, but that's all been fixed now. So all I had to do was say, hey, you guys might want to consider putting a teacher dashboard on there, or some way that teachers can go behind the scenes and see where their students are and track where they are, because I had to go around to each student and ask them to pull it up and go to each page, and then I'd see what they typed in, and I'd be like, oh, those questions are really bogus. Like, you didn't even ask a question there. You just typed some googly glop, and like then you moved on to the next page. Like, I caught ya, but it was hard to catch them, So they put that into the product now, so you don't even have to worry about that. So that's just one example of the many things I talked with Jessica about and Lindsay about getting fixed.
Another one that Marcia said that was very valuable was just that she mentioned not knowing what the kids were looking at when they were in VR. And so that actually led to, and I forgot to show it, but I was going to show it and I will now, the dashboard, we added in the ability to see what the students had interacted with based on that, because we did not have that originally in here. I have to get out of this one and go into one of the ones where I'm a teacher, which is not this one. So when I'm a teacher, then you can see in it, I can tell that what exactly they looked at, how long they looked at it, that, they didn't see this one. I can see all of that, and it updates as they're in there, so I can see if they went to the wrong VR scene. Another piece of feedback that we heard from teachers during the piloting is that they would go to the wrong scene, and they would be looking at things that they weren't supposed to. So based on that teacher feedback, we locked it, so you can't go forward. You could go to the wrong backward scene, but you would know because you've already done that. And here you can see in this one, they are tagging different creatures, so you can see what they each one tagged. And again, that was totally based off of teacher feedback saying, like, they were having these kind of challenges, or I didn't know what they did in VR, or I thought they had gone through VR but they hadn't. So that's when we added the yellow, that sort of thing. And here you can see like what they looked at versus what they actually took data from.
This is actually so interesting because I think like we've seen that teachers don't always use the dashboards that are available in EdTech products, but in VR specifically, it's so crucial that you have some, evidence or some, showing of like where the students have gone, and use that not just for assessment, but just to like, because they are in this immersive space, possibly in goggles. So you're not, visually seeing all the places that they are going to. And that's kind of really interesting. especially in terms of, just even teacher literacy around, dashboards and, data literacy, as you were talking about before, like a teacher's own data literacy. It's kind of an interesting use case to show for ed tech efficacy and usefulness, like how dashboards can really be used.
Yeah. Also, like another question I was interested is, when you started thinking about this project in the early beginnings, what made you say that, oh, let's do a VR part of it? Like how did that come up? And what were the benefits of actually doing that in 3D spatial, even WebVR version? But why did you choose that versus some other way to do it?
We wanted to make it as immersive as possible because, again, it goes back to the idea that we really wanted students to take on the role of a scientist. And when we talked about how we could get them to take on the role of a scientist, one of the first things we thought of was, oh, we should put them in VR. But then our scientist, Mandy Holford, was like, I'm not actually constantly on expeditions. Frequently, I'm writing things down. I am observing, I am comparing, I am collaborating, I'm doing all of these other things that scientists also do. And so that was so we actually thought first about the VR and then second about the Digital Science Journal. Yeah. And of course, Mandy was right that the Science Journal really is what kind of weaves and holds everything together. If you were to just have the app and go through, the 4 VR experiences by themselves, it would be kind of a storyline, but not really. You really need all of the kind of the framing and the analysis that you do in the journal is what really makes this product, I think, as impactful as it is.
It's really a simulation of a real world experience, like beyond just the science part of it. It's like the real world of like working in a profession and having the life around it, and that kind of back and forth you do between, as Mandy had put it, the experience and just the documentation piece. Like that is real world. That's how it really is. And so it's really gaining a lot of skills too along the way, not just the subject area content knowledge.
No, definitely. I think it's a really good combination that you have, and it's pretty rare in virtual reality educational project to have a good balance between being in VR but then doing things outside of it and taking notes, and all of that is, I think, super important also for other people working in that space and trying to think about education and using immersive technologies. It's like that balance is really great, I think, the way you did it, and that connection between platforms also is very good and compelling. I mean, it's a really great example. There's not many that do that, so.
That's right. Especially the platform is not a small issue, because we've already talked about equity and accessibility a little bit. Like having it be something that any school could use in whatever the devices they might have. I mean, flipping between iPad and Chromebook, and you can use both, and you don't lose your projects and your curriculum that you've built as a teacher, in between, whatever hardware upgrades or changes that might be happening in your school. I think we're at time. And so thank you guys so much. I wanted to just end to say that in the chat is a wonderful little comment about just how the story-driven approach is just really working, I think, for all the teachers. Marcia, thanks for bringing that up. And of course, Jessica, thank you for embedding it into your product. And thanks everyone for coming today and for your great questions. As we mentioned, or I mentioned in the chat, but we record the session, so it'll be available right at the same place where you signed up for the webinar on the Zoe Spatial Learning event page. It should be up probably by tomorrow at the latest. I just wanted to give a shout out to our next guest. Also, next week we're going to be coming back on Thursday, the 25th, and we're going to be meeting with Anurupa Gargoli, who has Prism VR, and it's a VR product that actually helps you explore in a tangible way math and physics concepts. So we're really excited to do a little bit of math in VR as well. But thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you, Marcia, for coming. Thank you, Emily, for inviting me to come and be part of the conversation. Don't forget to sign up on the Zoe website for next week's series, and we'll see you all then.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's been a pleasure. Jessica, you're awesome. Jessica, you're awesome. And Marcia as well. So, looking forward to see you all next week. It's going to be also fun and exciting.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.